Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Since I got my driver's license last year, I've been driving my younger brother to school every morning, even though we have a perfectly good bus service. I'm a senior in high school, he's a sophomore, and let me tell you, the amount of patience I've had to develop could qualify me for sainthood. My brother? He's the golden child. Mom treats him like he's made of precious crystal, while I'm basically the furniture that came with the house. You know that kind of parent who remembers to buy their favorite child's favorite cereal but forgets the other one, even eats breakfast? That's my mom. It started becoming a problem when my brother began treating my time like it was worthless. Every morning was the same routine. I'd shout up the stairs that we needed to leave in 5 minutes, and he'd give me his usual dismissive response about coming. 5 minutes later, I'd warn him we were going to be late, and he'd just ask for 1 more minute. After another 10 minutes of waiting, he'd have the nerve to ask why I was so stressed, saying we'd get there when we got there. After weeks of this, I finally put my foot down and warned him I'd leave without him if he wasn't ready on time. It took a few days of me actually following through with my threat before he finally started taking the bus. This kid started missing the bus regularly, forcing our mom to take him to school. Did she scold him? Give him any consequences? Nope. Not a single word about being more responsible or making her late for work. Nothing. Then came senior skip day. You know, that magical day when seniors get to sleep in and relax? Well, I should have known better than to think I'd actually get to enjoy it. Mom and our older brothers all had early work shifts, so guess who got stuck with brother duty when he missed the bus? Yours truly. When he came knocking on my door that morning, panic in his eyes because he'd missed the bus again, something in me snapped, especially when I gave him my usual lecture about respecting other people's time, and this little twerp had the audacity to laugh. I told him that if he wouldn't respect my time, I wouldn't respect his. He just brushed me off and demanded I drive him to school. Oh, it was time for some malicious compliance. I turned it into a beautiful symphony of accidents and oopsies. First, I made a show of not being able to find my license, pretending to search my room while he urged me to hurry up. Then, after finding it, I made a big deal about the frost on the windshield, citing safety concerns while he anxiously reminded me we were going to be late. I spent an absurd amount of time fiddling with my phone's connection to the car stereo, insisting I couldn't possibly drive without my music. When he asked if I was serious, I told him that driving without Pierce the Veil playing was simply impossible. We needed to leave at 7:10. We left at 7:19. And wouldn't you know it, the universe decided to join my revenge party. Every single traffic light turned red just for us. Traffic was moving slower than my brother's brain in the morning. School started at 7:30, but we didn't get there until 7:48. Mom had finally reached her limit with his bus missing shenanigans and had told him he'd actually be in trouble if he missed it again. For the first time in his life, he was facing real consequences, and boy, was he sweating. As he rushed out of my car, and in his panic to get to class, he tripped on the school steps and face planted right in front of everyone. I couldn't have choreographed it better myself. Later that day, I overheard him complaining to his friend about how evil I was for making him late. His friend, showing more wisdom than my brother had ever displayed, suggested that maybe he should just get up on time. My brother, finally seeming to get it, admitted defeat and said he'd be setting 5 alarms for tomorrow. The next morning, he was at the bus stop 15 minutes early. First, let me give you some context. I worked remotely from home even before the pandemic hit. After years of saving and living in a cramped apartment in the city, I finally managed to buy my dream house in a quiet, suburban neighborhood. No homeowners association, no restrictions, just pure freedom to live as I pleased. The house was perfect. A beautiful colonial-style home that needed some TLC, but nothing major. I spent 2 years renovating it myself, learning everything from YouTube and making it exactly how I wanted. The previous owner had lived there for 40 years before passing away, and their children sold it to me directly. Everything was clean and clear. No liens, no debts, nothing. Then came that morning that changed everything. I was working on a major project deadline when I noticed a piece of paper stuck to my front door. An eviction notice. At first I thought it was a prank, but it looked official enough to make my stomach drop. About an hour later I heard voices outside. Two guys in ridiculous blue uniforms with community security patches were walking around my property like they owned the place. I went outside and asked them what they thought they were doing on my property. The first security guy told me they were there to enforce my eviction and that I needed to pack my belongings and leave immediately. When I asked them under whose authority they were acting, the second guy claimed they were the new Homeowners Association security team and that the property had been reclaimed by the association. I told them there was no Homeowners Association here, that this was my property, and they were trespassing. The first security guy just replied that they had their orders and asked me not to make things difficult. I immediately called the police. While waiting, these guys actually started taking pictures of my house and making notes on their clipboards. The police arrived within 15 minutes. The first officer asked what the problem was, and I explained how these men were trespassing on my property and claiming they had the authority to evict me from my own home. That's when she showed up, driving a brand new Mercedes SUV. The HOA president herself, who I'd later come to know as Karen. Karen announced to the officers that she was the president of the Palm Grove Homeowners Association and claimed that this house was built on HOA land, giving them the right to reclaim it. When the second officer asked for documentation to support her claim, she pulled out some official-looking papers from her handbag, handling them like they were her winning lottery tickets. The first officer examined the documents and noted that something didn't look right, pointing out that the letterhead seemed off and questioning the signatures. Karen insisted everything was perfectly legal and that their lawyers had verified it. The second officer told her that until this could be properly verified through official channels, nobody would be evicting anybody, and they all needed to leave the property immediately. Karen became outraged and demanded to know if they knew who she was. The first officer sarcastically replied that yes, she was someone who needed to leave the property right then or she'd be arrested for trespassing. They left, but that wasn't the end of it. Over the next few days, I faced constant harassment. Karen and her minions would drive by slowly taking pictures. They left threatening letters in my mailbox. They even tried to have my utilities shut off by claiming the house was vacant. I'd had enough. I hired a lawyer and did some digging of my own. Turns out Karen had created a fake HOA after seeing how well maintained the neighborhood was becoming. She thought she could essentially take control of the area and start collecting fees. The documents she showed the police were completely fabricated. My lawyer was ecstatic. We had everything: the fake documents, security camera footage of the harassment, witnesses from the neighborhood, and even evidence of Karen attempting to file the fake HOA as a legal entity with forged signatures. We sued them for harassment, forgery, attempted fraud, and emotional distress. The case was so solid that their lawyer advised them to settle. I received $475,000 in damages, and Karen was charged with multiple counts of fraud. Karen's Mercedes got repossessed because she had to sell everything to pay the settlement. She had to move in with her daughter in another state because nobody in the neighborhood would even look at her anymore. Oh, and those security guys? Turned out they weren't even licensed. They were just some guys Karen hired and gave fake uniforms to. They got charged too. Now the neighborhood is peaceful again, and we've all gotten to know each other better through this ordeal. We even started a legitimate neighborhood watch program, without any HOA nonsense. My husband and I had been married for 12 years, and for the most part, things were good. We had 2 beautiful children, a comfortable life, and I thought we were happy. But the last few years had been rough. My husband started struggling with depression, and it got worse after he lost his job during the pandemic. He turned to alcohol to cope, and I watched helplessly as the man I loved disappeared into a shell of himself. I tried everything: therapy, support groups, even staging an intervention with his family. Nothing seemed to work. The breaking point came when I found him passed out in our bathroom one night an empty bottle of pills next to him. Thank God it was just sleeping pills, but that was it. I knew he needed serious help. After researching various facilities, I found a residential treatment center that specialized in both mental health and addiction. It wasn't cheap, but I was willing to do anything to help him get better. He agreed to go, probably because he was still shaken by the sleeping pill incident. The day I dropped him off was one of the hardest of my life. He looked so lost, so broken. The facility seemed nice enough. Modern building, friendly staff. A woman at the front desk gave us a warm smile as she processed his paperwork. Little did I know she would later become the source of my nightmares. Everything seemed fine at first. The kids and I had our scheduled calls with him, though he seemed distant. Then, 2 weeks into his stay, I received a text that made my blood run cold. In a formal message, my husband told me that he'd been thinking during his time there and believed we should separate. He added that his lawyer would contact me with the details. Just like that, 12 years of marriage, reduced to a cold, formal text message. I was devastated but tried to keep it together for our kids. The next 2 weeks were a blur of tears, sleepless nights, and forcing myself to function for our children's sake. When it was time to pick him up, I went, despite everything. I figured we owed it to our kids to handle this like adults. The ride home was awkward and silent. That night, while he was in the shower, his phone lit up with a message. I normally wouldn't look, but it was right there on the coffee table, screen bright in the dim room. The message was from an unknown number saying they couldn't wait to be official and that they loved him, complete with a heart emoji. My heart shattered all over again. Initially, I assumed it was another patient, which would have been bad enough. But then I discovered something far worse. Through some mutual friends, I learned that the sender was an employee at the facility, the same woman who had processed his paperwork the day we arrived. But it gets worse. His caseworker, who was supposed to be helping him recover, had apparently known about this relationship and said nothing. In fact, she'd been texting him privately since his discharge, like they were all best friends or something. I was livid. These people were supposed to be helping vulnerable patients recover, not taking advantage of them for their own romantic interests. I started doing research and discovered that this kind of relationship between staff and patients was not just unethical, it was potentially illegal. I gathered every bit of evidence I could find. Screenshots of messages, dates, times, names. Then I contacted the facility's administration. I requested an immediate meeting with the director regarding an urgent ethical violation. When asked about the issue, I explained that a front desk staff member had been having an inappropriate relationship with my husband while he was a patient there, and his caseworker was aware but did nothing to stop it. The director asked if I had any evidence to support these serious accusations. I sent everything I had collected. The director immediately responded, assuring me that the matter would be investigated thoroughly and that this behavior was completely unacceptable. I wasn't done. I filed formal complaints with the State Licensing Board and the Department of Health Services. I hired a lawyer who specialized in medical ethics violations. Within weeks, both the front desk woman and the caseworker were fired. The facility implemented stricter policies about staff-patient interactions, and both women had their professional licenses placed under review. My soon-to-be ex-husband was furious when he found out what I'd done. He angrily accused me of ruining their careers. I simply told him that they had ruined their own careers when they decided to take advantage of vulnerable patients, and asked him to consider how many others they might have done this to. The investigation revealed that this wasn't the first time the front desk woman had pursued a relationship with a patient, but previous incidents had been swept under the rug. My actions finally brought it all to light. The divorce proceedings are still ongoing, but I don't regret exposing what happened. These facilities are supposed to be safe places for people to heal, not hunting grounds for predatory staff members. My husband may have chosen to end our marriage, but those women chose to violate their professional ethics and take advantage of someone in a vulnerable position. They deserved everything that came their way. After spending 15 years in my cramped apartment in the city, I finally saved enough for a down payment on a beautiful suburban house. Working 2 jobs, as an accountant during the day and a virtual assistant at night, wasn't easy, but it paid off. The house was perfect. 3 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a yard big enough for the dog I'd always wanted to adopt. The closing day was going smoothly until the seller pulled me aside with an uncomfortable look on his face. He told me he needed to inform me about the neighbor on the left side. When I asked if there was an issue, he hesitated before explaining that she was quite intense, offering to share a recent example. He described how his yard man had been mowing the lawn and accidentally went about 6 inches over the property line. When I expressed disbelief that such a small transgression could cause problems, he explained how the neighbor had come banging on his door at 8:30 at night, completely hysterical about it. She even called the police when he sarcastically suggested she do so if she was so upset. He listed other incidents. She called the police over fallen leaves, Christmas lights being too bright, and once because his cat was staring at her menacingly through the window. I went home that night wondering if I'd made a huge mistake, but I'd already signed all the paperwork, and this house was perfect for me. I wasn't about to let one difficult neighbor ruin my dream. Moving day came, and as I was unloading boxes, I noticed a woman watching me from her window. She'd peek out, then quickly draw the curtains when she saw me looking. My girlfriend, who was helping me move, noticed it too and declared that this would definitely be the problem neighbor. I tried being proactive, baked some cinnamon rolls, one of the few things I can actually make well, and wrote a nice card with my name and phone number. An hour after leaving them on her porch, I found them in my mailbox with a note claiming she didn't accept food from strangers because it could be poisoned, and complaining that my moving truck had left tire marks on her grass, which was actually the public street. That piece lasted exactly 3 days before she started pounding on my door at midnight, completely agitated in her bathrobe. She insisted my bathroom light was too bright and shining into her bedroom, even though my bathroom was on the opposite side of the house. When I explained I'd been sleeping and my TV wasn't even on, she accused me of lying and threatened to call the police. After I set clear boundaries about her harassment, she demanded to know if I was threatening her. 20 minutes after I closed the door, 2 tired-looking police officers showed up, clearly familiar with the situation. Over the next few weeks, she called them 3 more times. Once because my new dog barked at a squirrel, once because I had too many cars in my driveway during a small dinner party, and once because my garden hose was suspiciously close to her property line. Each time I calmly showed the police my security footage and documentation. Finally, after the 3rd visit, they suggested I file for a restraining order given the pattern of harassment. In court, I presented my detailed log, security footage, and statements from both the previous owner and police officers about her pattern of behavior. My other neighbor, a sweet elderly lady, even testified about witnessing all the harassment and brought cookies to court, making the judge smile. The order was granted, requiring her to stop all direct contact with me and stay at least 20 feet from my property unless entering or leaving her own home. These days, she still glares from her window and sometimes takes pictures of my yard with her phone, probably looking for violations, but my cameras and the restraining order keep her at bay. I finally got that dog I always wanted, a friendly German Shepherd who loves to sit in the front yard and watch the neighborhood. Somehow, she hasn't called the police about him even once. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.